There is one skill, not 10, not a list of habits you need to develop or a morning routine you need to follow or a book you need to read before the end of the year. One skill, and the people who possess it, truly possess it, at the deepest level, are building the companies, shaping the technologies, and writing the rules of a world that everyone else is simply trying to keep up with. Elon Musk dropped out of a PhD program at Stanford after 2 days, not because he was lost, not because he was afraid, but because he had already identified the skill, and he knew that sitting in a lecture hall was not where it would be developed. He went on to build PayPal, Tesla, SpaceX, Neuralink, and XAI. He put rockets into orbit and cars on roads that run on sunlight. He looked at industries that had not changed in decades and dismantled them with a clarity that left experts speechless and competitors scrambling. And when people ask him, what is the secret? What is the thread that connects all of it? What is the one thing that made the difference? His answer is always the same. First principles thinking. Not talent, not money, not connections, not luck. The ability to think from the ground up, to ask why until you reach the bedrock of truth beneath every assumption, every convention, everything everyone told you was just the way it is. That skill is the future, and by the end of this, you will either have it or know exactly what is standing between you and it. It is 2001. The dot-com bubble has just burst. The world has watched billions of dollars evaporate from companies that were supposed to change everything. The mood around technology and bold vision is somewhere between exhausted and contemptuous, and a young entrepreneur with a recently sold company and a moderate fortune is sitting with a dream that almost everyone around him thinks is delusional. He wants to send a rocket to Mars, not as a government, not with billions in pre-existing infrastructure, not with decades of institutional knowledge and armies of aerospace engineers. He wants to do it privately. He wants to build it from scratch. He wants to make human beings a multi-planetary species. So he does what any reasonable person would do. Before committing to something of this magnitude, he researches the cost. He contacts rocket suppliers in the United States. The prices are staggering. A single rocket costs between $60 and $90 million. The numbers are so enormous that even for a man of his means, the dream begins to feel like exactly what everyone said it was. Impossible, so he flies to Russia. He wants to buy refurbished intercontinental ballistic missiles, repurposed cheaper, a workaround. He meets with Russian aerospace officials. He sits across from men who have been building rockets their entire lives. He is young. He is American. He is not an engineer by training. They laugh at him. Literally. They find his ambition so presumptuous, so naive, so thoroughly disconnected from the reality of what rocket science actually requires, that they laugh in his face. He flies home empty-handed, and on that flight, that long, quiet, humiliating flight back, across the world, something happens that changes everything. Not just for him, eventually for all of humanity. He does not get angry. He does not give up. He does not decide that the experts must be right and the dream must be wrong. He opens a spreadsheet, and he starts from scratch, not from what rockets cost, from what rockets are made of. The raw materials, the aluminum, the steel, the fuel, the components. He researches each element individually, finds the commodity price of every ingredient, and begins calculating what a rocket should cost if you built it from first principles, instead of accepting the industry's inherited price structure. What he finds changes the entire trajectory of the 21st century. The raw materials for a rocket cost approximately 2% of the price the aerospace industry was charging. 2%. The rest was markup, inefficiency, legacy infrastructure, institutional inertia, and the quiet tyranny of the assumption that this is just how it is done. He was not buying that assumption anymore. SpaceX was born on a flight home from Russia and a spreadsheet filled not with accepted prices, but with first principles. Here is the thing about first principles thinking that nobody tells you. It is extraordinarily hard. Not hard in the way that lifting heavy weights is hard, where you feel the resistance and know you are building something. Hard in the way that standing in a room full of experts who disagree with you is hard. Hard in the way that dismantling your own assumptions, the beliefs you have held so long they feel like facts, and is hard. Most of us go through our entire lives without ever doing it. Not because we are not intelligent, not because we are not curious, but because we live in a world that is organized, at every level, to discourage it. Think about how you were educated. You were taught answers. You were rewarded for memorizing the right response, reproducing the accepted framework, fitting your thinking inside the shapes that already existed. The student who challenged the premise of the question was not celebrated. They were redirected. The employee who asked why the process was structured this way was not promoted. They were managed. We are trained from childhood to think by analogy, to look at what already exists and adjust slightly from the edges, to accept the floor as the floor instead of asking why the floor is there and whether it needs to be. Elon Musk calls this reasoning by analogy versus reasoning from first principles. And he says with absolute conviction and that reasoning by analogy is the thing that keeps almost everyone trapped in a world someone else designed. The struggle is not external. 3 times the Falcon 1 rocket exploded before it reached orbit. 3 attempts, 3 failures, each one consuming money, time, credibility, and the kind of hope that does not come with a refund. After the 3rd failure, the company was down to its last funds. The team was exhausted. The critics who had been waiting were sharpening their "I told you so," and the man at the center of it all, who had publicly committed his entire fortune to this vision, sat with his engineers and made a decision. They would try once more. Not by adjusting the plan, not by compromising the vision, by going back to the principles, by asking not what went wrong, but what is actually true about what we are trying to build, and are we building toward truth or toward assumption. The 4th launch succeeded, not because they worked harder, because they thought deeper. The turning point is not a moment that happened to Elon Musk. The turning point is a moment that is available to you right now, in this conversation. It is the moment you decide to stop accepting the floor as the floor. First principles thinking is not a technique reserved for rocket scientists or billionaire entrepreneurs. It is not a tool that requires a physics degree or a Silicon Valley zip code. It is a discipline, a practice, a way of interrogating reality that any human being with enough courage and enough patience can develop. But it requires something most people are not willing to give. It requires you to be wrong in public. It requires you to ask questions that make you sound like you do not know things that everyone else takes for granted. It requires you to sit with uncertainty long enough to reach actual truth instead of settling for comfortable consensus. Musk has said that the turning point in his own thinking came when he stopped asking what is the best way to do this and started asking what is actually true about this. Those are not the same question. The first question accepts the parameters. The second question burns them down and rebuilds from ash. What is actually true about this career I am in? What is actually true about the business model I am following? What is actually true about the relationship I am maintaining? The city I am living in? The belief I have been carrying since childhood about what I am capable of? These are first principles questions. And the answers, when you are honest enough to find them, are the turning point. For your business, for your finances, for your relationships, for the entire architecture of your life. The first lesson: question the cost of everything you have accepted as fixed. When Musk looked at rocket prices, he did not ask, how can I afford this? He asked, why does this cost what it costs? Those are different questions with completely different answers and completely different futures attached to them. The industry was not lying. That was the price. But the price and the cost are not the same thing. The price is what someone has decided to charge. The cost is what something actually requires to exist. Find the gap between the price you have accepted and the actual cost of what you want. In that gap is where your breakthrough lives. What is the rocket in your life that everyone says costs too much, takes too long, requires credentials you do not have, demands resources you cannot access? Ask not what it costs on the market. Ask what it actually requires. Build from there. The second lesson: expertise is valuable until it becomes a ceiling. The Russian aerospace experts who laughed at Musk had spent their entire careers mastering a system, and their mastery was real. Their knowledge was genuine. Their experience was hard-earned and deserving of respect. But their expertise had become a ceiling. It had calcified into the belief that the way things had always been done was the way things had to be done. And when someone arrived who had not yet learned what was impossible, who had not yet inherited the ceiling, they could not recognize the question he was asking because they had stopped asking it decades ago. This is not a criticism of expertise. Expertise is essential. Musk hired some of the most brilliant aerospace engineers in the world to build SpaceX, but he hired them to apply their expertise within a framework that he had built from first principles and not to define the framework itself. The lesson is this: seek expertise voraciously, learn from the masters of every field that matters to your work, but never let expertise, including your own, become the voice that tells you what is possible. Expertise should inform your thinking. It should never replace it. The moment your knowledge stops being a foundation and starts being a fence is the moment you need to go back to the beginning and ask why again. The third lesson: the most powerful questions sound like the simplest ones. Children ask first principles questions constantly. Why is the sky blue? Why do people die? Why do we go to school? Why is that rule a rule? And at some point, somewhere between childhood and adulthood, we stop asking. We accept, we assume, we adopt. Musk never stopped asking. He has described his thinking process as the algorithm, a relentless sequence of questions applied to every problem, every process, every assumption in every company he has ever built. Question the requirement. Delete the unnecessary, simplify, optimize, automate, in that order, never the other way around. The story of Tesla's battery is a perfect example. When Musk entered the electric vehicle space, the prevailing wisdom was that battery packs cost $600 per kilowatt hour, and that was not going to change significantly. The experts said so, the industry said so, the analysts said so, and so companies built their business models around that assumption. Musk asked, what are batteries actually made of? He broke them down to their material components: nickel, cobalt, aluminum, carbon, polymers, a steel can, and calculated what those materials cost on the commodity markets. Less than $80 per kilowatt hour. The gap between what everyone accepted and what was actually true was enormous, and closing that gap became one of the defining competitive advantages in the entire electric vehicle revolution. The most powerful question you can ask about anything in your life is this: why, and then why again? And then once more, until you reach the bedrock, until you are standing on something true rather than something assumed. That is where the future is. Built. The fourth lesson: first principles. Thinking is an act of radical responsibility. Here is something that does not get said enough about this skill. It is not just a tool for building companies or disrupting industries. It is a tool for taking complete ownership of your own life. When you reason from first principles, you cannot blame the system. You cannot point at the industry and say the prices are too high. You cannot point at your background and say the opportunities were not available. You cannot point at the experts and say they told me it was impossible, because first principles thinking dissolves all of those excuses by asking one devastating question. But what is actually true? Is it actually true that someone with your skills and your situation cannot build the life you want? Or is that a price someone else set that you accepted without checking the actual cost? Is it actually true that the industry you want to enter is closed to people who look like you, come from where you come from, started where you started? Or is that an assumption built on analogy, on the pattern of what has happened before rather than the truth of what is actually required? First principles thinking puts you in the driver's seat of your own life with a terrifying and liberating completeness. It removes the comfort of inherited excuses, and it hands you something far more valuable in their place. It hands you the truth. And the truth, as uncomfortable as it sometimes is the only foundation on which anything real can be built. Want you to think about the version of your life that you have decided is not possible. Not the version you are working toward. Not the version you are hoping for if things go well and the timing is right and you get a few lucky breaks. The version you have quietly moved to a shelf. The version you stopped talking about because the gap between where you are and where it lives felt too wide to take seriously. The business you told yourself was too competitive. The creative work you abandoned because you were not talented enough. The reinvention you postponed because you were too old. Too invested in where you already were. Too uncertain about whether you had what it takes to start again from nothing. What if the gap between where you are and that version of your life is not a talent gap, not an opportunity gap, not even a resource gap? What if it is a thinking gap? What if the only thing standing between you and the life you actually want is the set of inherited assumptions you have never questioned? The prices you accepted without checking the costs, the ceilings you inherited from experts who stopped asking why, the floor you have been standing on for years without ever bending down to examine what it is actually made of. Elon Musk was laughed at in Russia. He was mocked by aerospace engineers who had forgotten more about rockets than he would ever learn. He was told, by credentialed, experienced, genuinely intelligent people, that what he was attempting was not possible. And he went home and opened a spreadsheet, not because he knew more than they did, but because he was willing to ask a question they had stopped asking. A question so fundamental, so basic, so absurdly simple, that it had become invisible inside all the layers of expertise and convention and inherited assumption. What is this actually made of? You have a life that is made of something. It is made of decisions and habits and relationships and beliefs that were built over time, some of them deliberately, many of them by default, most of them never examined at the level of first principles. What is your life actually made of? Not the surface, not the story you tell at dinner, parties, or the version on your resume, or the explanation you give when someone asks how you are doing. The actual components, the beliefs that drive your decisions, the assumptions that define your limits, the prices you have accepted for your own potential without ever asking what it actually costs to become who you were meant to be. Go to the bedrock, ask why until there are no more whys to ask, and build from there. Because the future, the version of the future that belongs to the builders and the thinkers and the people who refuse to accept the floor as the floor, that future is not reserved for the genius or the wealthy or the connected. It is reserved for anyone willing to ask the question everyone else has stopped asking. It is reserved for you. If you wanted enough to think for it, here is your practice. Starting today, pick one thing in your life that is not working. One thing you have accepted as fixed. One price, financial, professional, personal, emotional, that you have been paying without questioning whether it is the actual cost or just the number someone handed you, and apply the algorithm. Ask why it costs what it costs. Break it down to its actual components. Strip away the convention, the inherited assumption, the expert consensus that may have calcified into a ceiling. Find the bedrock. Find what is actually true beneath all the layers of what everyone has accepted for so long that it stopped feeling like a choice. Then, and this is the part that separates the people who think about this from the people who change their lives because of it, build a response from that bedrock. Not from the existing options, not from the adjustments available at the margin, from the actual truth of what the problem is made of and what solving it actually requires. This is not easy. It is not comfortable. It will make you sound naive to people who have stopped asking questions. It will make you seem presumptuous to people who have confused their expertise with their ceiling. It will require you to sit with uncertainty longer than feels reasonable. Do it anyway, because the first principles thinkers are not waiting for the future to arrive. They are building it. They are in the garage right now, looking at a spreadsheet, calculating what something should cost instead of what everyone says it costs. They are on the flight home from Russia right now, opening their mind instead of closing their dream. They are refusing, quietly, persistently, completely, to accept the floor as the floor. That can be you. That should be you. The future belongs to those who understand this one skill. Not because they were given it, because they chose it. Every single day. One question at a time. One why deeper than the last. Go deeper. Find the bedrock. Build something true. The floor is not the floor. Not for you, not anymore. If this reached something real in you, share it with someone who is ready to ask different questions. Subscribe for more content that does not just inform you. It challenges the architecture of how you think. And tell me in the comments, what is the one assumption in your life that you have never questioned but know you need to?